For this section, we will learn how to display data from a database in an Open Edition application. Specifically, we will display the data as a table on this detail page. In order to do so, we must create a database table, connect an API to it, and then query that API from our application. Let's start off first by defining the database table. We can search for table definition to define the table and click add. We will name our table example, and let's go to the properties tab to set the different properties of this database table. Let's click add, and each entry in our database will have a name, an age, and a job. Let's click save, and our database is saved. Let's then add data into our database by typing in table browser. Here we can select the table we just created, and if we see what is in our database, right now there will be no data. We can select all the attributes by clicking the checkbox in the top left and run a query to see our data, and there is none. However, we can change this by clicking on Edit and then Add. Here we can set some data in our database. Let's click Save, and you'll see that the Open Edition automatically gives each entry an ID, a created at, updated at, and created by, updated by properties. Next, let's create an API and connect it to this table. We can search API and go to the API designer. Next, we'll click on Add. This API will be an API from a table definition. So let's set the type to table definition. The name will be example API. And we can import the specification of the table right from the table definition by clicking at the top right on Import and then Table Definition. We can select our table, and here this will create the operations that are most common to most applications: create, read, update, delete. Don't forget to select the checkbox for Use in App Designer and App Editor so that your API is visible. Next, we can go to the Operations tab and see that we have a get, put, post, and delete operation for the API. Let's save our API, and now we can test it in the API client. Let's search for API and click on API client, and we'll see the API right here. Now we can select the get method of our API and simply hit send. And look at that, we have all of our data from our databases table. Now that our API and database are working, let's use them in our application. Because we created an API while this application was open in the app designer, we need to refresh the master data in order to make this API visible for this application. We can do so by clicking Application and Refresh Master Data. Now we can go to the component library, type in REST API, and drag it to the resources panel. Here we can go to the REST API section of this component and select the API we want. The component that will receive the data from this API will be a table located on the detail page. We can search for the table here and drag it to the detail page. If we activate, we will see that the table has no data. This is because we have not set up the response on the API call. Let's click on the API and set the setInitLoad attribute to online. This means that when the app comes online, it will immediately call this API. Now, after the call, we will get a response. And this response can either be a 200 successful response or a 400 error response. We will send the 200 success response to the table component, which right now is called OTable. Now, all we have to do is set the table component such that it can receive this data from the API. This is done using the model source. So click on the table component and then click on the model source dialog button and select example. Now we can use the table wizard to generate all this data and layout for us very quickly. We can right click on the table component, go down to wizard, and select insert fields display. The fields that I want are name, age, job. Click create. And now we have columns with our data binded to them. Also note that each one of the columns and the text components have a unique name. Let's activate and see what our table looks like. Here we have Mary, 26, Solutions Architect, and all the rest of our data in this table displayed for us right here. The text components receive the data from the model source through a binding. And this binding can be viewed here. So each one of these columns has a sap.m.text component, and then the text component has a text attribute that is bound to the specific data property of this entry. And we can see the binding here. Note that we can also change the binding from, let's say, name to ID if we wanted to. Now when we activate and navigate to the detail page, we'll see that the ID is under name instead of the actual name. We can change that back by clicking on the binding and reselecting name, activating, and our application is back to normal.